Growing up, I lived with my mum because my dad was a soldier who frequently traveled for work. This meant I didn't get to see him very often. My mother was always loving and attentive, making sure everything at home was just right. Occasionally, my uncle would come to visit us, and he was always kind, bringing gifts and making us laugh. I trusted him completely. Now, as a 20-year-old university student, my life seemed normal. Everything felt like it's going smoothly until one day when something happened that changed everything. After a long day of classes, I came home feeling exhausted. My body was going through its usual monthly changes, and I wasn't feeling my best since my period had started. My uncle was visiting us again, and since he had always been a part of the family, I didn't think twice when he offered to help me with my schoolwork. He sat next to me on the couch, close enough that I could catch the familiar scent of his cologne. Initially, everything felt normal, just like any other day. We talked, and he asked me about my classes and how I was doing. The conversation flowed smoothly, and I didn't suspect anything unusual. After a while, I felt even more drained and told my uncle that I needed to rest. He nodded with a gentle smile, and I got up to head to my room. I had no idea he had other intentions. As I walked into my bedroom, I thought about how fortunate I was to have such a caring family. My mum was always there for me, and my uncle had always shown kindness. I didn't have any reason to feel uneasy. Yet something about that day felt slightly off. I dismissed the feeling, thinking it was just because I was tired. I changed into some comfortable clothes and sat on my bed, hoping to relax. My thoughts wandered back to the conversation I'd had with my uncle. He had asked more questions than usual. At first, I assumed he was just being friendly, but as I lay there, I started wondering why he seemed so curious about everything I did. While period often made my body feel different, and I sometimes found myself restless, with my thoughts drifting in unexpected directions. It was as if my body had its own way of expressing itself. Especially during those days of the month, emotions felt more intense, and I wasn't always sure how to manage them. When I was in boarding school, life became even more complicated. Being surrounded by so many other girls meant constant conversations about everything, including our periods. My friends talked openly about it, treating it as a normal part of life. They shared tips and experiences, making it hard not to be drawn into their excitement. One day in the dormitory, I listened as my friends shared their thoughts about their periods. They laughed and exchanged stories about how they dealt with cravings and changes. Some of them mentioned using something they called a doodle to feel better when their bodies felt strange during their periods. With this, we don't need a man, one of them declared confidently, and the others cheered in agreement. They explained how they'd learned to satisfy themselves, especially during that time of the month when their bodies craved touch. Their confidence was inspiring, and I couldn't help but admire it. They revealed their little secrets and methods, talking about how they found pleasure on their own. It's like a little adventure you can take whenever you want, one of my friends added with a sparkle in her eyes. I listened closely, fascinated by the way they described exploring their bodies and discovering what made them happy. At first, I felt shy about the idea. It seemed so bold, but the more I listened, the more I wanted to understand. They talked about how using their hands or certain objects could help them feel relaxed and content. It sounded like they had discovered a whole new world, one that was exciting and liberating. With each story, I began to realize how important it was for girls to understand their own bodies and learn ways to feel good, especially during times when everything felt overwhelming. The idea that we didn't need a man to experience satisfaction felt empowering. It made me reflect on how I could explore my own feelings and figure out what I wanted. The conversations inspired me. I wanted to embrace that same sense of freedom and self-discovery. As I listened to their laughter and stories, I felt a spark of excitement. I knew I had a lot to learn, but I was eager to start my own journey just like my friends had. I listened intently, intrigued by her explanation. She encouraged me to try it if I ever felt curious or restless. It's just for you, she said. You can explore your body and figure out what feels good. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that step, but a part of me wanted to understand. The idea lingered in my mind like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Eventually, one day while I was still in school, I decided to try using the doodle. I felt both anxious and excited, uncertain about what to expect. I thought back to the conversations I'd had with my friends and the way they described the enjoyment it could bring. One afternoon, when I finally had some time alone, I took a deep breath and decided to give it a try. As soon as I started, I was amazed by how good it felt. The sensation was so overwhelming, like a wave washing over me, and I couldn't help but smile. It was as though all the tension and uneasiness I'd been carrying just melted away. I allowed myself to get lost in the experience, feeling free and content in a way I hadn't known before. Until I tried it myself, I didn't fully understand what my friends had been talking about. From that moment on, using the doodle became my own little secret, something I truly cherished. Even after starting university, I carried that discovery with me, realizing I could turn to it whenever I sensed the familiar signs of my period approaching. It became part of my routine, a way to feel more at ease during those challenging days. Now that my period had returned, I was determined to try it again. Thinking about how much I had enjoyed it in the past, I couldn't wait to revisit those feelings. I found a quiet moment in my dorm room, ensuring I had complete privacy and prepared myself. My heart beat faster with anticipation, and I smiled at the thought of the relief and pleasure I was about to experience. Settling in, I felt a blend of comfort and excitement. Closing my eyes, I recalled how it felt before and allowed myself to sink into the moment. This was my time to relax and enjoy something that was solely for me. I couldn't wait to rediscover those sensations and see how it would feel this time. When I finally used it, the rush of pleasure was incredible. It felt like a warm wave spreading through my body, and I couldn't help but smile at the sheer joy it brought me. Each time I explored my body this way, I uncovered something new about myself. It was exhilarating, giving me a sense of independence and freedom I had never known. As I continued using it, I realized I didn't need a boyfriend to feel happy or fulfilled. At first, I worried that focusing so much on my own pleasure might not be right, especially since so many of my friends were dating or constantly talking about their crushes. They often joked about needing a boyfriend for certain things, but I felt satisfied with the discovery I had made. There were moments when I wondered if I was missing out on something by not having a boyfriend. Watching my friends share sweet moments with their partners, I sometimes thought it might be nice to experience that kind of connection. But then I would think back to the happiness I felt during my private moments and realize I was perfectly content without a boyfriend, at least for now. This was my time to focus on myself, to learn what made me happy and understand more about who I was. I was discovering how to appreciate myself, and that felt incredibly empowering. I cherished these moments of solitude, finding peace and comfort in them. My journey of self discovery was just beginning, and I was eager to keep exploring without worrying about anyone else's opinions. After satisfying myself, I felt completely calm and content. Lying down on my bed with a lingering smile, I let my body sink into the soft mattress. It was such a relief to unwind after a long, busy day at university. I closed my eyes, letting the quietness surround me like a warm blanket. Just as I began to drift off to sleep, a soft knock on the door jolted me awake. The sound startled me, and I quickly sat up, my heart pounding slightly. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. I strained to listen, wondering if I'd imagined it. But then I heard the knock again, a gentle, persistent tapping that urged me to get up. I quickly composed myself, sitting up straighter and trying to shake off the discomfort. Are you okay? I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual, though my heart was beating faster. I studied his face, trying to understand what was going on. There was something in his eyes that unsettled me, a look that triggered alarm bells in my mind. Just this morning, I studied this face, trying to understand what was going on. There was something familiar, alarm bells in my mind. He glanced around the room as if searching for something before replying. Yeah, I'm fine. But his tone felt too casual, almost forced. As he took a step closer, I felt a flicker of anxiety. Shifting slightly on the bed, I tried to keep the conversation light, despite the growing tension. What brings you here? I asked, doing my best to sound friendly, even as unease tightened in my chest. His gaze lingered on me, studying me in a way that felt different from the usual dynamic between us. I just wanted to check on you, he said slowly, his voice lower than usual. I hadn't seen you in a while. There was an intensity in his tone that felt off, too serious for a simple visit. I wanted to convince myself that he was just being a caring uncle, but my instinct said otherwise, forcing a smile. I tried to ease the tension. I'm fine, really, just relaxing, I replied, trying to sound upbeat. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the confusion and unease bubbling inside me. Why were you there? What was the meaning behind that expression on his face? My mind raced with questions, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was an intensity in his eyes that unsettled me, as though he was trying to convey something I wasn't prepared to comprehend. It felt like he wanted to come closer, maybe even sit beside me on the bed. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding at the thought. His gaze lingered on me a bit too long, sending a shiver down my spine. It seemed as though he was silently expressing a desire that made me deeply uncomfortable. I wanted to convince myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew the way he was looking at me wasn't normal. Shifting awkwardly, I tried to break the heavy tension that hung in the air like an oppressive fog. Is there something you wanted to talk about? I asked, hoping to steer the interaction in a safer direction. My voice was slightly shaky, but I tried to sound brave. He hesitated, his expression shifting uneasily between the familiar warmth of a caring uncle and something far more unsettling. I just wanted to check on you, that's all, he replied. But his words carried a weight that made me doubt his sincerity. My heart raced as I struggled to maintain eye contact. I wanted to tell him how uncomfortable his gaze made me feel, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I fidgeted with the edge of my blanket, trying to ground myself in the moment. I thought about all the times he'd been kind and supportive, struggling to reconcile that image with the person standing before me now. I'm fine. Really, I repeated, forcing a smile. Just studying and relaxing. I hoped my words would ease the tension, but as I spoke, I noticed something flicker in his eyes, a hint of an unspoken desire that made me want to withdraw. I wished I could close the door, put some distance between us, and remind myself that I was safe in my own space. But before I could react, he stepped closer, and my heart sank as he said, "We should have some fun together." His words hung in the air, and a wave of panic washed over me. I wanted to move away to create some space between us, but my body felt frozen. As he leaned in, I could barely breathe. Caught off guard, I didn't have time to respond before he pressed his lips against my chest. A cold chill ran through me, and I was overcome with confusion and fear. This wasn't the kind of fun I had in mind, and I realized I was in a situation I never wanted to be in. I gently pushed him away, trying to keep my composure. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. A storm of emotions swirled inside me: fear, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. This wasn't how family was supposed to behave. I had always trusted him, and now that trust felt shattered. His expression shifted, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of surprise or frustration. "Come on, don't be like that," he said, stepping closer again. My heart pounded as I realized I needed to stand my ground. "This isn't right," I said firmly, my voice quivering but determined. "You're my uncle. You can't do this." The words felt heavy, but I knew they needed to be said. His demeanor changed, and I took a step back, my back pressing against the wall. A surge of determination rose within me. I wasn't going to let him take advantage of me. No matter how he tried to twist the situation, I had to protect myself. "Please leave my room," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. I knew I had to stay strong. I wouldn't let this moment define me or rob me of my sense of safety. Just before he entered the room, I had taken time for myself, indulging in a private moment of peace and satisfaction. It had been a personal experience that left me feeling relaxed and content. The last thing I wanted was for someone to disrupt that feeling. When I saw the disappointment in his eyes, it stung slightly, but I didn't care. This was my body, my choice, and I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate how I should feel or what I should want. As he stood there, his expression a mixture of confusion and frustration, I realized this moment wasn't about him. I had made the choice to prioritize my feelings and boundaries, and that mattered more than his expectations. I wasn't going to let his disappointment overshadow my right to feel safe and in control. "Look, I'm not in the mood," I said firmly, trying to make my stance clear. I needed him to understand that I wasn't just there to fulfill his desires. This was my space, my sanctuary, and I needed him to respect that. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably, and I could see him wrestling with his emotions. A small part of me felt sorry for him, but I quickly reminded myself that my well being came first. I had every right to say no, to protect my feelings and my boundaries. "I hope you understand," I added, softening my tone slightly. "It's just not the right time for me." He sighed, and I could tell he was still disappointed, but I held my ground. Um, in that moment, I felt proud of myself for standing up for what I wanted and refusing to let anyone pressure me into something I wasn't ready for. I felt empowered, knowing I would always prioritize my own choices and feelings above anyone else's expectations.